Hello kids, today we are going to begin shading. One of the elements of design that we use for shading is value. We're going to use crayons today, and I would recommend using darker crayons for this introduction to shading. So I'm going to pick this violet. It's a nice dark color. And what I'm going to do is just make a rectangle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just for practice. I'm going to make just 5 divisions on my paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we're going to do is shade these in with different values. And basically you do this by pressing down hard on your crayon and slowly releasing. So I'm going to go ahead and just color this first one in. Is going to be as dark as I can possibly get it with no white space. Okay, so this one's pretty dark. You really got to press down hard. Yeah, not that hard. That happens. It's a great thing about crayons is you just peel off a little bit more and keep moving. You can do this with colored pencils and a regular pencil. When you're a beginner, it's nice to have a crayon. It just goes a lot faster, easier to hang on to. So I've tried to color everything in as solid as possible. It's impossible to get it completely covered in sometimes just because of the texture of the paper. So there's my first one. I'm going to call this 100%. Okay, so this is the hardest I can press down. The next one I'm going to press down hard, but not as hard as the other one. So now we're creating less value by releasing the pressure. One thing you want to do when you're shading is you try not to have too many lines showing. So you can kind of see my lines going up and down. So I like to go back in, and I'll turn my paper often so it's easier for my hand to work. And I'm just going to go in and try to do like ovals, circular motion. Try to blend away some of those pencil strokes. Okay. All right, so there is a lighter value of my violet, or purple. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and go lighter yet. And everybody's lightness will be a little bit different, and darkness will be a little different. Just try to match to the best of your ability. The next one will be even lighter yet. Okay, and if you can get even lighter on this one, great, or you can leave it white. I'm going to go and try to get as light as I can. You almost have to lift the crayon up. The weight of the crayon could be too much pressure. And again, can you do it without seeing any of those pencil strokes? All right, so there we have a nice value scale. So we'll say this about 5% pressing down. And then 0% would be right here. So this would be our 6th one. So that would be a 0%. Who knows what percentage that is? It could be 10%, but you get the idea. All right, so this gives you an idea to get the feel of how to create a value. We call this a value scale. And this is going to give you a feel for the different pressure that you need to use to create value. The next stage in shading is going to be called, or is called, graded value. So a graded value is when this happens, but you can't see lines. So there's 100%, 99%, all the way down to 2% to 0%. This is the hardest. It's called a graded value. scale. Running out of room here. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing I did up here, but I'm just going to gradually release my pressure as I go across the page. Notice I'm really kind of using circular motion. I want to blend it in. Pencil strokes or the stroke of your crayon should not show if you want to have an effective illusion. The hardest part for me, and I think for most kids, is going from that 20% zone right here. This is the hardest zone, I believe. So that's a graded value. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this for the next part of our project. You're going to need something round that you can trace, and you don't want it real big. I have a little buttercup here. You don't want it too small, and you don't want it too big. This is a great size. If I had a ruler, I'd say it's about 2-3 inches wide. Another thing that you could use would just be, the inside of a tape roll or something like that. So I'm going to get another piece of paper. This is good to practice on. Value scales you're going to constantly do. If you're in art, you'll do them often, and they just help you become better at shading. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step. And the next step is I call soft edge shading. We use soft edge shading is when you use a graded value. Okay, so soft edge, you use a graded value. There's also something called a hard edge. And a hard edge would be done on a more of a geometric shape. So if I had, just as an example here, if I had a box, I would use hard edge shading on this box. So on this side, I might go this. There's no graded value. It's all the same value, depending on where the light source is coming from. Light source is a big deal. On the top, maybe a little lighter. And then maybe on the front, I can go really dark. Now once you get more advanced, you can actually use black and different colors to intensify the shade on your objects. All right, you don't have to do this. If you want to do it, you can, but this is an example of hard edge shading right here. So I'll just put a little arrow there, hard edge shading. I'll just put hard edge, you get the idea. So the next step is to make a shape, which is two-dimensional. Shape is a two-dimensional object on a flat piece of paper. And I want to try to create the illusion of form. So we're using all of these terms that are from the elements of design. We have value. We have shape, which is 2D, two-dimensional. And then we have form, which is three-dimensional. So right now this is 2D. It doesn't look like it's popping out at us. And we want to create the illusion that this can pop out at us. And if we use the correct shading technique, you can make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate on how to make this circle, which is a shape, into the illusion of a form. I can't actually make it a form because then I could hold on to it in real life. All right, so it's the illusion of form by using these shading techniques. So what I'm going to do is I need to figure out where my light source is. So just imagine a light bulb shining on the direction on the ball. Let's put it in this direction. You can put it anywhere you want. So what's going to happen is you can probably figure out where the light parts are going to be here and the dark parts are going to be here. So even though there's going to be a lot of graded value, one of the things that is important is how do you make your shade. So you don't want to make lines going straight across on an object that is the form that is round. Okay, so you actually want to curve your shading. And to do that, really, it's pretty easy, because if you look at the way your wrist moves, see how your wrist moves? It moves in a curve anyways. If you'll notice that Mr. Dykema likes to move the paper around, okay? And there's a reason for that, kids. Some people like to try to do all these twists and turn, and your coordination, you're going to be really good at keeping your hand in the same position that you use when you write. When you're writing, you've been doing it for so many years, your coordination is really good. So I like to keep it in that position the best possible way. So the best way to do it is, my coordination's best if I keep my hand in the same position but turn the paper. So I turn the paper quite often. All right, so what we're going to do is, very important that you do this really light. And this is just kind of a guide. I'm going to go in, and this is the darker area. So the darks are going to be on this side, and the lighter side is going to be in here. So I'm going to go ahead and super light. Hardly see it. You never want to see any lines on this. I'm just going to make another circle in there, just freehand in. Okay? And what's going to be important about shading is that this white area that will be left eventually should always remain a circle. All right? Now, the very first thing we're going to be doing is pressing down 100%. So this outer edge is actually a hard edge, because it's going to go from 100% dark to 0% extremely fast. There's no gradation. I like to use a sharper crayon for this, or if you just turn your crayon over and just use that edge on your crayon, or do whatever it takes to get this dark. So it looks like I'm just outlining, which pretty much is, but I really want to be careful that the outside edge doesn't get doesn't have any little lines sticking out. It's a nice, solid, crisp line, as crisp as you can get with a crayon. Crayons are not necessarily always made to get that nice, crisp, hard edge. We'll do the best we can. And kids, this isn't something that you're going to master the first time. It's something that takes a lot of practice. Even when I do this at the beginning of the school year, I just don't seem to be as good as I am later on in the school year after I've done them a few times. So now remember, this is the lighter area. All right, we don't want to make any circles here. You don't want to leave anything here. I want to have a white spot right here. So I'm going to go in, and if you notice, I am going 100%, turning my paper, shading, or filling in the value, or coloring, whatever you want to call it, and I'm curving my hand, because that is going to help create the illusion that this has, this is round and three-dimensional. So now as I get around over here, it gets smaller and lighter. I'm already starting to release my pressure. Okay, so go back, we'll take a look. So we have our 100% here. We could probably go even more of 100% here, but just remember, be careful not to have straight lines. Okay, it's curved. If you like to do it the other way, where the crayon is facing in instead of your hand facing in, I'm going to do it that way too. Turning my paper, like I said, keep your hand in that position that you write in. Your hand works better that way. Don't be afraid to twist your paper around when you're working. All right. I am starting to release the pressure. You never want to release it too fast, because then you're going to see a line. And it's going to be, if you can visually see a line on this circle, it's it's going to take away from the illusion that we're trying to create. So I always go back and I always tell kids, buff it out. You know, when you're buffing something out, you're doing circular motion. So even though I'm going side to side, I'm actually doing or doing curves. There is a little bit of a rounded pencil stroke. I keep saying pencil, but it's a crayon stroke. But I'm going to just keep going around, and I'm going to just check for a second. Let's take a look. Is your white space still white? Then you're in good shape. If it's looking oval or square, even worse, then you need to adjust your shading in certain areas to make it round. So remember, on this side, it's going to be the darkest, so it takes a little bit longer, a lot longer, to go from dark to light. Sometimes I'll go in and just kind of go over some areas. Very time consuming to do this. Even more so if you're using colored pencils. That's why I like the crayon. The crayon really blends nice, especially for beginners. All right. Slowly releasing the pressure. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Remember, down here it's going to take longer. Is the white space still round? Is the key. Is it still round? I'll probably speed this up. So eventually I want it to be white right here. So on this side it goes pretty fast. As you can see, it goes fast, dark to light. So I'm going to try to go from our 100% hard edge on the outside edge to 0 really fast here, and then that's about it. Just fades to nothing, which is hard to do. With practice, you'll get it. You're using what we call fine motor skills when you're doing shading like this, and that is a muscle or that just is refined for really small details. So I'm still working on the value here. Okay. Now if you're not careful, you can accidentally push down too dark there. Now I don't know. Sometimes you can erase things like that, but sometimes an eraser will make it worse. So I'll try it out. A little bit I got out of that, a little bit, but that's okay. Go back in. And here's the hard part. Here's a little trick for this. What you need to do, excuse me, is have a dull space. So sometimes I'll have another piece of paper next to me. You know, you can even use this one. And I'll dull down one side. So there's a flat space there, a flat edge on my crayon. Okay? I don't know if you can see that. Let's bring it up to the camera. See how flat that is? Okay? So I want that flat edge to lay on the paper. And then just lightly go, if you can, to 1% to 0. Make sure you leave a 0% there. There it is. Now I can still see some lines, but
So there is your shaded sphere. And now it looks three-dimensional. Now you could add something else to it if you wanted to even make it more. You could take some shade. You know, the light's coming here, so the shade would come over like so. Okay. All right, so the reason why we're doing this is we're working towards our next project, which is going to be shaded ornaments on a Christmas tree.